Council. Metro Council is a community mental health centers. It's a collaborative membership organization representing the public mental health systems of community behavioral health centers serving the greater metropolitan Kansas City area. We provide support to our member organizations, education, information, and resources to the public on accessing quality health services. We host the Mental Health KC Conference every May as well, provides free webinars on the second and fourth Thursdays of every month. Please save the date for our upcoming fall symposium, which is on October the 28th from 9:30 to 12:45 on ethics, social media, and boundaries at the Mid-Continent Public Library on Red Bridge Branch Community Room. It's only $25 for 3 hours of ethics training. Also, just a reminder, the views and opinions presented are those of the speaker and not necessarily represent the opinions of the Metro Council. At the end of the webinar today, we will put the link and password to get your certificates of attendance for this webinar. I am excited to introduce Kirsti Millar, presenting on Get Comfy, Being Uncomfy. Let's talk suicide prevention. Kirsti Millar is the Suicide Prevention Program Manager at ReDiscover, where she oversees the Show Me Zero Youth Suicide Grant, serving individuals from ages 10 to 24. With a decade of experience in the mental health field, Kirsti provides a strong background in crisis intervention, therapeutic services, and case management for both youth and adults. Over the past 9 years at ReDiscover, she has applied her creativity and leadership to expand programs and deepen client engagement. Kirsti holds a master's degree in counseling from Missouri State University with an emphasis in play therapy. And she is passionate about working with young people and building a meaningful community partnership. She has completed extensive training in a variety of evidence-based approaches, including motivational interviewing, positive youth development, harm reduction, trauma-informed care, vicarious trauma, EMDR, assessing and managing suicide risk, and play therapy. Kirsti, welcome, and I will stop sharing my screen, and it's all yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for sharing your lunch hour with me. Like Renee said, we're going to talk about suicide prevention today, but I always like to give a couple disclaimers. First being, I like to engage as much as I can in the chat. Please pretend we're in person, engage with me. I will do my best to monitor it. Obviously a webinar, I'm talking more at you than with you, but I believe that we learn best when we are, thank you, Allison, when we are talking together. Secondly, I don't really expect to give you a lot of information you don't already know. If you are a clinician, particularly in the mental health field at all, hopefully you take away nuggets of knowledge, but my goal is really to just enhance confidence in this conversation. So to get us started, let's go ahead and chat about who I am, who you're talking to. Renee just did a very, very kind introduction, but my name is Kirsti. I work for ReDiscover. I've been a part of the suicide prevention program since they started about 9 years ago. I always say, if you know me, you know that I say they're my babies before my human babies. I'm a therapist. I carry an LPC license. I'm a mom. I've got 2 sweet kiddos. I'm a wife, a husband who I adore, and taco enthusiast. I'm sure you can all pick up on the beverages that come along with tacos that I am also an enthusiast of, but to say PC and professional, we'll leave it at tacos and queso. And I like to share this just because I'm a human. I have totally tumbleweeded my way into my career. But first and foremost, I'm a person. And then I carry all of these titles alongside that. So let's talk about some myths and maybes. No one can stop a suicide. It's inevitable. Myth, maybe. Normally, if we were in person, I would have you raise hands and kind of tell me. You're welcome to throw your thoughts in the chat. To keep us on time, I'm going to move us along a little bit. But these are statements that I live daily in the world of suicide prevention that I just like to stop and talk about for a second to really get our minds into suicide prevention. This one is a myth. And the myth behind it, we're going to talk into these a little bit more. So I'm going to pause myself a little because I get ahead of myself because I get excited. But these are really things that semantics also matters. If a person in crisis gets the help they need, they will probably never be suicidal again. Myth or maybe? I saw a few people pop in the chat, so I'll give you guys a second to pop in the chat if you feel like you want to take a stab at it. No right or wrong answers around here. Those of you that put maybe, you would be accurate. Again, we're going to talk about these in a minute, but really just start jogging your brains on why. Confronting a person about suicide will only make them angry and increase the risk. So this is really leaning into that notion of if I think someone is suicidal and I ask them that question, I'm giving them the idea. Wow, we are popping off with myths. You guys are accurate there. Only experts can prevent suicide. I'm seeing some myths come in. Again, you are accurate there. We've got one more page and then we're going to dive into each of these. Suicidal people keep their plans to themselves. Myth or maybe? Seeing some maybes. Notice I didn't use false. I specifically used a myth or a maybe. And there's reasons behind that. Those who talk about suicide don't do it. So these are our friends that talk about it a lot, and we sort of live in the camp of they talk about it all the time. They're never actually going to act on it. Myth. Those of you that are saying myth, you're right along with me. People who talk about suicide might even try or complete an act of self-destruction. Now, self-destruction is something that we're going to dig into here in a second too. So leaning into if someone is suicidal, are they also engaging in self-harm? I'm seeing some maybes. So let's dig into these. No, thank you so much for participating. That was lovely. I know a lot of you are probably on your lunch hour, but you are here and with me, and that means so much to me. No one can stop a suicide. It's inevitable. So let's talk about why. The tagline is suicide prevention is anybody's business. And I can tell you all day long that having a conversation genuinely, truly might save someone's life. Here's another qualm I have with suicide prevention trainings as a whole. They make these conversations sound so simple. And they are, but they're not easy. There's a difference. Talking to someone, whether it's clinically, personally, it doesn't matter, about their life ending on their hands is not an easy conversation. And myself and my team have this conversation more often than a typical clinician, but I would be lying to you if I said that was ever an easy thing. And so I think recognizing shy of a medical intervention, there are a lot of things we can do to help someone understand their suicidal thoughts and manage them. But it's never inevitable. I like to believe kind of like an ER doctor does. And let's be honest, I don't make the salary that an ER doctor does, but they aren't always assuming they're going to save everybody's life who comes in their doors, but they do everything they can in their power every single time to do that. And clinicians are really no different. The next one, if a person in crisis gets the help they need, they will probably never be suicidal again. Honestly, it's the language a little bit on this one because suicidality can be chronic. So there's a true high possibility that when someone's experiencing that, they will have it again. The difference in this specific statement is that we hope, anyway, they've established the help. They got the help that they needed in that moment of crisis. And so now they will utilize that support. So for example, they call 988 and it goes well. And now they know that that resource is there when they're feeling suicidal again. I do a lot of education, obviously, with my clients as well, because being an LPC and a program manager means I can't help but take on a couple therapy clients. And I have a terrible analogy for suicidality, but I promise you, you'll never forget it. Suicidality is a lot like a rash. It's chronic for some people. It's a side effect of medication. It sometimes is a standalone irritation without any reason. And sometimes we know the reason, but it consistently is irritated because it's triggered by something. There are so many possibilities to why someone is suicidal. It is not fair to say if they get help, it won't happen again. Because the reality is for some people, it very well can and will happen again. It's putting those supports in place to be able to help them through that the next time. This one is one of my favorites. Confronting a person about suicide will only make them angry and increase the risk. This is my favorite because it is still a decade in the myth I dispel on a daily basis. And I love to help people understand it. The reality is, asking someone directly about their suicidal thoughts decreases their anxiety, allows for further communication, and overall lowers the risk of an impulsive act. Now, again, this makes it seem really simple. This makes it seem like if you sit down and talk to someone and ask if they're feeling a certain way, that they're just going to magically open up, tell you everything, you're going to mount a unicorn and ride it off into the resources. That's not how it usually happens. Unfortunately, we all work really hard in a really broken system, and people don't always trust those conversations. So I'm going to reiterate, it's really simple, but it's not easy. It's absolutely a tug of war, and it's making sure that we know how, it's not even what to say, just how to treat these people like humans to be able to help them navigate how they're feeling. Suicidal people keep their plans to themselves. This one is, if you recall, a maybe, because most people communicate their plan sometime preceding the week of their attempt. So the key word here is most, not all. If you ever met an adolescent, they're impulsive little boogers. There's a lot of disorders that make us impulsive. There's a lot of symptomology. There's a lot of substances that can make us impulsive, meaning we may not have a plan until we have a plan and then we act on it. So if they have a plan, they may be communicating it, but it may not look like today at 3 p.m. I'm going to go home and take my whole medicine cabinet. It may look more like my life would be better off if I just wasn't here. No one would miss me anyway. I won't make it to graduation. It might look like things like that, where they're kind of testing themselves. How do I feel about this? What do I think about this? And it's really, again, that conversation piece that we have to help normalize. I'm seeing it kind of happen in the chat. Sitting with them and acknowledging that this is a normal emotion is part of the first step. Only experts can prevent suicide. We said this was a myth. Everyday people can prevent suicide by talking about it. Mental health professionals, of course, too, but everyday people. I love to tell a story about the Raytown Walmart on 350. A long, long time ago, my team was housed out of what is now ReDiscover's urgent care. And as a true social worker, I never bring my lunch and I am always multitasking. And there was one day I was popping in that Walmart to buy a Lunchable. Yes, I said a Lunchable, to get something to eat in between my meetings. And I was on my phone. And the greeter that was working at the time at Walmart was bellowing out hellos. And his words felt like great Uncle Eddie at the family reunion. They just engulfed you from the moment you walked in the door. Oh my gosh, hello, I'm so happy to see you. To the point where he physically stopped me in my tracks. And I had to think like, oh gosh, do I know this person? Why is he being so welcoming? And then I realized it was quite literally every single person walking in the door. And as people were leaving, it was the same thing. Bye, I'll miss you. Have a great day. I in no way want to diminish him into just a Walmart greeter, but outside of a mental health professional, his job is not to make people's mental health better on a day-to-day basis. His job is to greet you walking into Walmart. But he was doing his job and quite literally stopped me in my tracks. I felt so seen in that moment. If I had been someone who was struggling with thoughts of not wanting to be here, nobody caring, it is so possible that that layperson working at Walmart could totally have changed the trajectory of somebody's day. So I share that specific story, and I apologize if you've heard me say that before, but that story has rung true for me for the last 7 years. That was 7 years ago. And I can still picture him and still feel his words and the warmness that they provided. And I was not struggling that day. I just wanted my dang Lunchable, and I was answering emails while I walked in. He made such a difference. You do not have to have any magical powers. I don't have magical powers that I'm dispelling to you today. I don't want to make you cry. I don't have a script. So I hope you can see that really all I'm trying to do is instill the confidence that you already have. Those who talk about suicide don't do it. This one gets tricky. I think we said this one was a myth because at the end of the day, people who talk about suicide are thinking about it. They're just not sure they want to end their lives. So what I have to say is that suicidal people don't actually want to die, most of them. Most of them want their pain to end. And so they are not sure of any other solution. They have almost come up with tunnel vision. This is the solution. This is what I have to do. And they start to make sense of that. That's why we start to see that peace that comes oftentimes before someone actually attempts. They don't actually want to die. Their pain is just so insurmountable that they haven't figured out how to process. They don't know what to do. And maybe they haven't found the right solutions. So just because they're talking about it doesn't mean they don't mean it. But I think we also have to remember there is symptomology where people seek grandiose responses. And if we constantly give the grandiose response, the statements are going to continue because the response is what's giving them comfort. So we really have to look at our responses. How do we systematically still take this statement very serious, even if it's 97 times in a week, and say it calmly and collectively, but not grandiose? Because I would almost be willing to bet that if they were seeking that grandiosity, and again, it's not a conscious sought out, it's symptomology, but if that's what they're seeking and that reduces, and in turn, the suicidal statements reduce, in theory, they're likely seeking the grandiose response. Regardless, we take it serious every time and we respond in a way that's cool, calm, collected. We're going to talk about that in a minute because I don't know if you guys remember, but you are also human. And this conversation is not easy as a human. So it's how do we manage our emotions is a big part of suicide prevention also. People who talk about suicide may try or even complete an act of self-destruction. We said this was a maybe. Individuals who are struggling, we talked about, they don't actually want to die. They want to end their pain. And while it's not often a healthy way or ever a healthy way, they often manage their pain by self-harm. There's examples of things like cutting, burning, alcohol use, hypersexuality, food restriction, the list goes on, but all of them land in pain management to some capacity. And they've decided that this is how they manage that pain. But not everybody who is struggling with suicidal thoughts engage in self-harm. And not everybody who engages in self-harm is suicidal. It is absolutely a gateway to that conversation. It's also a nugget of knowledge to tuck. If you are someone who treats individuals, I like to ask if I find out they are self-harming. Are you self-harming for pain and punishment, or are you self-harming for release? Clinically, to me, those are two very different paths. If you're self-harming for release, typically in my experience, a little bit more control, it's in an environment, it's something emotion, that feeling, that physical feeling even. But if you're cutting for pain and punishment, in my experience, you're often cutting when you're really, I'm saying cutting because that's mostly my experience in that category, but self-harm as a whole, you are often emotional, dysregulated, and sometimes are harder ways than even you mean to because you're not regulated in that moment. To me, as a clinician, that's much more of a challenge. We first have to really heal that reaction and that emotion before we can replicate that behavior. But I, in my experience, asking that question, have stopped dozens of clients in their tracks because sometimes they don't know what's the purpose behind this. And understanding the purpose behind our behaviors is absolutely how we work towards heavy and hard conversations like this. Once a person decides to complete suicide, there is nothing anyone can do to stop them. Before I step onto the explanation, I want to take just a moment to lean into semantics here and give a kind reminder that language actually shifted. Back in 2017, there was a push from the American Psychological Association. We no longer say someone died or someone committed suicide. We say they died by suicide or they completed. Historically, we also used to say when someone died by suicide, a successful suicide, which is just not really the most client-informed way to say those things. So you'll notice the language in these statements is leaning into the new age statements, which is completing suicide versus committing. So just a gentle reminder. But once a person decides to complete suicide, there's nothing anyone can do to stop them. Again, like I said earlier, shy of a medical intervention, there's actually a lot we can stop and do to help someone who is struggling through those thoughts and behaviors. But there's some information gathering that we have to have also, and we're going to talk about what that looks like here in a minute. again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, so I apologize now. Really, what it boils down to is treating them like people, recognizing that you're a human, you're going to have reactions to their behaviors, but having that conversation where you can gain as much information as possible to help make an informed decision of what's next. Sometimes as clinicians, we get stuck in not fun situations where we have to make life-altering decisions for people to keep them safe, but we can't do that without the information. And again, I want to recognize I'm making it sound really simple. It is absolutely simple. It is not always easy. So what are we looking for? Verbal clues, things like, I don't want to be here anymore. I think about dying. I dream about dying. I don't know if I'll make it to graduation. I don't know if I'll see my kids grow up. All of those statements are people not sure what life will look like. There's behavioral clues. Oftentimes in adolescence, it's really tricky to tell if they're pubescent or they're depressed and anxious and potentially suicidal. So again, gathering information, learning how they're feeling, watching those patterns is a huge piece of that. Isolating, giving away prized possessions is kind of a coined one. Something that I challenge with that, we are in a very new age. A lot of that is digital now. Think about your teens and the passwords and their Snapchat streaks that they care so much about. Think about your aging loved ones. I think about my parents. They're retired. They have a lot of electronic documentation. They have finances. A lot of that is electronic now. So in the older populations, it can look like aging parents just trying to prep their children for the day that they do pass. And it can never even be thought of twice that maybe they're actually putting this in line for a different reason. So if at any point something feels off, let's talk about it. That's really what I want you to pull from today. If at any point something feels off, there's no wrong time to have this conversation. Situational clues. This looks like getting fired from a job, getting expelled from school. This looks like moving, whether it's a spouse who's moving to support their partner in their job. It's a kid who's moved several times again. A number of things. So if you think back to my rash analogy, it's that irritant, it's that one shirt that really causes this, that really ignites it. Like I mentioned, physical, we're not sleeping, we're not eating, or maybe we're sleeping too much, we're eating too much. I like to say really any big change in behavior is cause for conversation. It doesn't mean that you lean into like, hey, I noticed you've been napping every day. Are you feeling suicidal? I'm not saying that. You don't have to jump that far ahead yet, but gathering that information and sharing that with them. Hey, I've noticed A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Can we talk about how you're feeling? Is really helpful. I've already kind of mentioned, because I got ahead of myself, depression versus puberty. I don't know. I don't want to trigger anyone in stepping back into thinking about your pubescent years, but you don't even know what's going on when you're living through that. Your hormones are raging, your body is changing. Now, in today's day and age, these kids have social media and the internet to compare themselves to. It is so difficult to know the difference between depression, anxiety, and puberty. And it's not like they get like one freckle on their face where we can be like, you, my dear, are just depressed. We have to really have a conversation with them, really get that, because the symptomology of those two overlaps so much. So my team actually did not found this and discover, I like to say rediscoverized it for me. I am happy to get this out to anybody who's interested. But I really like this image for a number of reasons. It helps an individual see that suicide is on a spectrum. Just because you live in one particular category does not mean I have to have a big reaction as a clinician or as your loved one. It also, if I'm working with a youth, helps the family understand, because I cannot fathom, I mentioned I'm a mom, mine are littles, but I can't imagine looking at the human I created, looking at the human I raised, and trying to not blame myself for how they feel. So really helping them understand where we really have to react versus where we can live in. I share a story. So again, I apologize if you've heard this, but I had a client several years ago who chronic suicidality, a long history of trauma. And a lot of our conversations were about her suicidality. That was her response to any big emotion. That was her response to any change. She did not have that regulation. A lot of our beginning conversations was, I'm not trying to fix you. I'm not trying to remove those suicidal thoughts. I don't have that power. I don't even know if a medication has that power. But my job is actually to teach you how to live with them. And at the time, she took such a big sigh of relief. My therapists out there know you got to call attention to the behaviors. So I, of course, was like, tell me more about that. What was that sigh for? And she said, in her experience, no one had ever formed it that way before. I'm not trying to fix you. I'm trying to teach you how to live with how your brain functions. So for her, it was, let's figure out what to do when you start to recognize these thoughts. Of course, we take absolutely everything serious, no matter what, even down in those random intrusive thoughts. They can go impulsive very quickly. I'm not saying that doesn't mean that we still don't act. What I'm saying is we don't have to react. What this allows us to do is truly see that spectrum and recognize that just because someone sneezed and it sounded like suicide, it doesn't mean we have to panic, throw them in the hospital. There's actually a lot of things we can do prior to that. Now, to my hospital friends, there's a time and a place for you, and we love you and we use you often. But sometimes we overuse you, and we have to help people learn how to work through their crises, making sure that they have the space to do that and the understanding of what's going on. And here's where I get to remind you again. Remember, I told you I'm a broken record. You are human. And it is absolutely okay if you are the professional, the adult, the caretaker in the situation to say, you know what, I don't know what to do. As long as that's followed by a but, and not your but a but. And I know you can't see me, but I hope you're all laughing because I have really cheesy jokes and sometimes it just boosts my ego to know you think I'm funny. The but is, thank you, Kelly. The but is, we're going to figure it out. We're going to find out together. Whether that's you call 988 together, whether that's you lean into another professional in your building, you get another trusted adult involved, helping them understand. Because, right, as a therapist, my goal isn't to fix you. And it's not even really to teach you how to live. It's to help you have the skills and help you build the village to be able to function on your own. That's my goal. And I happen to live in a space where I help people who live up in that orange and red category, where they are in survival mode and they don't know how to come out of it. And neither does their support systems. So it's taking a breath. It's trying not to panic when someone tells you they're suicidal. It's helping see where they're at in this and then stepping forward into action. I see lots of you want a copy of this, so I'll make sure we get it to you in some way, whether that's you get my contact information and I send it to you, or if I can get it to Metro Council and send it out, happy to do that too. So I want to touch on modalities for my therapists in the group. There are evidence-based modalities that do help with suicide prevention, so it's worth talking about them. Cognitive behavioral health therapy actually has a suicide-specific nugget that focuses on recognizing and challenging those negative thought patterns, helps to increase distress tolerance, and help them foster problem-solving skills. Like I just mentioned, there's lots of people who just don't have those skills, and this has become their reaction to anything big because it just feels easier than feeling the emotion. I'd rather check out than feel that feeling. So sometimes this approach can help. And now I'm going to remember, therapy is not a one-size-fits-all. These are evidence-based practices that may work for individuals. There's also cognitive restructuring that lives in cognitive behavioral therapy. So we're helping that adolescent identify and reframe catastrophic thinking that often comes alongside that suicidal ideation. So we're shifting them out of catastrophe and helping to increase that distress tolerance. Together can really give them that space to do that. Interpersonal therapy, or IPT. This is focused on adolescents because that is my wheelhouse, but again, it can be applied anywhere. The language that I use is just because when I typically do this presentation, it's specific to the adolescent population. But really anybody with interpersonal struggles, as we know, IPT helps them build those healthier relationships and improve social functioning. Addressing that isolation piece and improving their communication is truly crucial for suicide prevention, because if that is why they are feeling suicidal, they feel so isolated from their people, they aren't really sure how to have those conversations or even how to articulate how they're feeling. We have to first teach them those basic skills to help them navigate through that. And the age-old DBT, the most evidence-based therapy out there for suicidal ideation. It is particularly effective for adolescents, but truthfully also adults with emotional dysregulation, because it teaches mindfulness, that regulation piece to their emotions, Distress tolerance is huge for my fellow DBTers and the interpersonal effectiveness of all of this. But again, not one size fits all. I'm a therapist where I like to kind of pull from each modality to fit the person that I'm serving. But you'll notice the same language in some of these: distress tolerance, emotional regulation, because remember back to that thermometer, oftentimes people go from 0 to 1,000 because that's how they've taught themselves to regulate their emotions, is they live in, well, the world would just be better off without me. What am I doing here? What's the point? So leaning into that with them, even if you're not a clinician, is helpful. DBT also has some evidence based in reducing self-harming behaviors by allowing them to learn how to tolerate painful emotions and build resilience, not resistance. And really, that's the piece of this too, is how do we feel emotions? I don't think it's a secret that our upcoming generations have kind of shied away from big emotions because of technology, because of the world we live in. We almost have to turn it off in some capacity to survive. Shout out to all of my helpers, because it is a hard time to breathe and help right now. You got to come up for air sometime. And we are working overtime to teach our young ones and anybody in any other category who leans into technology. Technology does amazing things, but it doesn't feel for us. And so recognizing where we can teach them to still feel those emotions, and ultimately having suicidal thoughts isn't a bad thing. It's your brain processing. It's when we start to act on them that we have to really take a hard look at, let's make sure that doesn't happen. But the thoughts can live there. I can help you. Any clinician on this call can help you live with them. But it's how do we do that, and how do we make sure those thoughts don't turn into action, and or give you the skills and the resources to lean on if you're feeling like they might. It's so simple, right? Like I said, so simple. So how do we start this conversation? As you see, my friend, jumping into a cliff here, jumping into the abyss. Oftentimes I think people interpret me as saying, like, Kirsti, what am I supposed to do? Just sit down with my friend at coffee and be like, hi, how was your weekend? Are you thinking about suicide right now? That's not how it goes. It might, it can, but how we have this conversation absolutely looks different per person. Like I mentioned, I live in this world professionally, but I will be the first to tell you personally, I think I would struggle if I ever had to ask my husband. I think I would struggle if I ever had to ask a friend or my sister, or heaven forbid, my children someday. And that is okay. So for those situations, for me, it might be, I need to find someone to start this conversation. I see the signs. I'm concerned about the signs, but I know I'm going to have such a big reaction. I cannot be the one to have this conversation. So before I dive into this slide, I want to just say again, but dive into it a little bit more. You are human. Your reaction to this conversation, either professional or personal, is valid and allowed. You care about people, and the person that you have to have this conversation with is someone you care about to some level. What I don't want you to do is have that reaction with the person. So for example, if you're feeling emotional and you are going to have a big emotional reaction to this person, let's check in with ourselves. Should we be the one having that? Because if we start to emotionally react in this type of a conversation, who does the conversation become about? Us. It shifts it off of the person we're caring for, and it becomes about us. And then we're not doing our due diligence in having this conversation. But I'm not saying don't feel. Now, there is a very fine line on what I'm about to share, but I think it's important to share it. It is okay to acknowledge that you're feeling some type of way. What's not okay is to be bawling and clinging to their leg and begging them to stay alive. That's not what we want them to do, guilting them. But people care so much about you. We want you to stay. We need you here. That is not helpful. This person already feels like a burden to their world in some capacity. We are just adding weight to their shoulders in doing that. What we can say is, actually, this is a really hard conversation for me to have. I'm really worried about you. Can I ask you some questions? We can talk about what those questions look like here in a second. I think it's also okay to say, I might get emotional based off your responses. I want you to know I care about you. I love you. And I'm going to take care of me so that I can hear you. Those types of things are okay. Just like I said earlier, if they say something and you don't know how to handle it, it is okay to say, I don't know. Here's my shameless plug for 988 as a big, strong reminder. 988 is not only a suicide line, it is also a crisis line. And we don't define crisis. You also don't have to be the individual in crisis to call them and get their support. There's a lot of caretakers and loved ones who call 988 looking for, give me some tips, give me some resources, help me have this conversation. What can I say? What should I say? Recognizing all of those things. So how do we start this conversation? What's a script? Kirsty, give me a script, is what I get asked for the most in my career. I am not giving you that. The closest I will ever give you to a script is the Columbia. But we can start a conversation by just starting it. Asking the question. So starting a conversation looks like, hi, how are you? I'm so happy to see your face. I'm so grateful you joined us today. How are you? How has your week been? We just talk to them like people. If we are worried about them, even if last session they were super high risk and we've thought about them nonstop since then, and you know you need to safety plan and do the Columbia and all of the things, that's okay. Have that on your to-do list. But first, just let them be people. They're people first. And we want that connection to help them remember why we want them here. I'm sure some of you on the call have heard this before because I hear it a lot. It's just your job to care about me. And my kind of quoted statement to that is, if it was my job to care about you, it didn't make its way into my job description. You are happy to review what ReDiscover gave me for my job description, but nowhere in any paragraph does it say anything about caring about my people. That's just who I am as a human. That's why I'm in this field, is because I care about people and I want people to feel heard and have space that they claim as theirs. And the people that we serve struggle to claim that space and struggle to feel regulated and ultimately see the world as a better place without them. I won't bore you with theories, because those of you that know me know I love a good suicide prevention theory and I get in the weeds with them. But all of them have a version of a Venn diagram that have two strong components. Most of them have a third, but the same overlapping two strong components for someone struggling with suicidality is burdensomeness and loneliness. I feel like I have no one, and the people that I have, I feel like I'm a burden on. So I saw a couple chats acknowledging, thanks for saying, hey, we'd miss you. That's our innate human reaction. I would miss you if you weren't here. I care about you, right? Your family loves you. You're so good at your job. They've already decided solutions to all of those things. How do we build a world worth living? So asking that question looks a number of different ways. How are you feeling about suicide? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Here's where I challenge semantics. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Is a lovely question, and please ask it. But don't stop there. For my English teachers, if there's any on there out there, killing and hurting are not the same verb. So we're getting only one question answered, because they may have no plans to hurt themselves because they've decided to kill themselves. So all of that to say, I'm sure you're like, Kirsti, you said this was simple. You're throwing all these questions at me. What the heck? Acknowledge them as a person, point out their behavior, and ask the question. There really isn't a wrong way to ask it. In my opinion, it's more about semantics and tone. So if I approach someone like, oh, it's Friday at 3 and I have happy hour plans, are you thinking about suicide today? Because that's always when it happens, when you have plans and on a Friday, just saying. Or when you have to get your kid or something crazy. If I approach you where I'm annoyed already at the start of the conversation, you're not going to be honest with me. You're going to take care of me. If I seem scared of the conversation, you're not going to be honest with me. You're going to take care of me. Notice I didn't purposely put the questions on the screen, because there is a number of ways you can ask this question and still get the same answer. My personal favorite is starting the conversation, maybe acknowledging a handful of things I've noticed, and then directly asking, are you thinking about suicide today? Because I'm going to get one of what I say 3 answers. I'm getting a yes, I'm getting a no, or what I call dodgeball, where they just dodge answering the question and you know really what that answer is. I also think it's worth acknowledging once I ask that question, I have to figure out what to do with the answer. So I have to assess for risk. Depending on my relationship with the person, that's going to look different. That's where something like the Columbia comes in. Maybe I use that to assess for risk. That is the short version of that. For those of you who don't know, it's a quick yes or no 6-question screener that allows us to understand kind of that thermometer that I shared with you earlier. Where are your thoughts? Are they attached to a plan? Do you have a plan that you even want to act on now? Do you have that intent? So for example, a lot of the times what my staff see, unfortunately, it's way more common than I think I could even admit. We have 14-year-old, 15-year-olds who have plans for when they're 18. Well, I'll give life a shot. And if by 18, I still feel how I feel, I've got a very specific plan filled out. If they're 14 in my office sharing that, and I know they don't have access to their plan, their date is after they've turned 18, I have 4 years to work with them and help them figure out how to do that. It's the Columbia. It also is it's the Columbia Severity Suicide Risk Assessment. I can put it in the chat for you too. So recognizing that I still have to take it serious. That doesn't mean that they don't have a plan for next week. It's not like I'm just taking a big sigh of relief, but realizing there's still that level. CSSRS, yes, thank you. There's still that level that we have to assess for in risk and what that looks like. And that's really what it comes back to, is the conversation. So we start that conversation with, hello, how are you today? How was your weekend? Good morning. I'm so glad you're here. What do you want to talk about today? And then I said I wasn't going to give you the questions because I wanted to talk first, not have you read. You can give it a 3-tiered approach. Have you been unhappy lately? Have you been very unhappy lately? Have you been so very unhappy that you've been thinking about ending your life? Obviously, we let them respond in between each of those questions. If I have someone who I think may be reactionary to the word suicide, may shut down if I ask directly, maybe this is the approach I take. I'm still getting to the same meat of the question, just with different language. Do you ever wish you could go to sleep and not wake up? If you're familiar with the Columbia, this is actually the first question of it. So what the Columbia does is take really overarching suicidal thoughts and help you narrow them down to see where they land on that risk assessment. But I say be cautious with this. I have a sweet 5-year-old who loves her dreams. They're full of fairies and cotton candy and unicorns. And while I hope I never have to ask a 5-year-old this question, if I did, she may interpret it as, no, I don't want to wake up. My dreams are freaking parties. So be mindful of the cognitive ability of who you're speaking to when you're having these types of conversations. I believe the Columbia can be done as young as 11. I believe there may be a version out there for as young as 6, but don't quote me. You know, when someone feels as upset as you do, they sometimes wish they were dead. I'm wondering if you're feeling that way too. I love this question as a therapist because it's essentially saying, hey, you're not alone. People feel this way. Are you there too? So in some ways, I'm validating how you're feeling. And I'm also still asking that question. And then, of course, the one I told you my team loves the most. Are you thinking about killing yourself? So as you can see, I'm in no way giving you a script, but here's a handful of ways that this conversation can look like and can happen after we've acknowledged I'm worried about you. Again, this isn't sitting down at the dinner table. Anybody thinking about killing themselves today? Probably not the best approach. So are there assessments to help me for my clinicians out there and really non-clinicians, because a Columbia can actually be done by the layperson? Like I've mentioned, the Columbia assesses for suicide risk, and if it's present, the PHQ-9 is actually specific for depression, and it can look to see if suicidality is present. I will say, be mindful of, I am not saying any of these assessments are a true answer to if someone is suicidal. They are simply there, my disclaimer, I'm full of them. They're there to help you gain more information. In fact, the PHQ-9, 8 of the 9 questions are depression specific. Number 9 is suicide specific. A lot of agencies around here utilize the Columbia to utilize the PHQ-9, to fast kick a Columbia. So if somebody answers, yes, I'm struggling with suicidal thoughts on the PHQ-9, that then triggers the Columbia to gain more information about those suicidal thoughts. So really, these are just tools to help you navigate through how that person is feeling. I will do my best to stay off a soapbox about a safety plan because I believe every living, breathing person should have one. It doesn't always mean that a crisis is suicidality. What does it look like when we need help? How do we safely plan to live through big emotions? That's what a safety plan is. How do we acknowledge how we're feeling and then put tangible people and skills in place to keep us safe through that big emotion? So it allows that tangible skill. It allows them to lean into their village. Who is it that you can call upon? I'm not available 24/7. I go home to my family at night. I don't answer my work phone on the weekends. So again, going back to what I said earlier, in my opinion, a successful completion of therapy isn't just teaching someone skills, isn't giving psychoeducation on their diagnoses. All of those are pieces of it, but it's building out their village and their skills to help them live in that world. Now, if I have someone who truly has no village, that looks different. We're going to have to practice calling 988. We're going to have to lean into our crisis services. We're going to have to build those supports and educate on what they look like. So here's a picture of a Columbia for those of you who maybe have never seen it. I like to say it's a pretty foolproof form within reason, but realistically, you answer 3 of the 6 questions no matter what. The form tells you exactly how to do it. This one happens to be color coded. And like I said, it is the absolute closest thing to a script any clinician will ever give you. Really what it's doing is asking those broad questions and then helping you narrow down. Do you have the thoughts? Okay, do you have a plan attached? Do you have thoughts on how you would implement that plan? And that bottom question, have you ever done anything? Because if someone has taken thoughts and turned them into action, if at any point someone has ever attempted suicide, they live in a 50% greater risk than individuals who haven't. Individuals who just lived with thoughts and never turned it into action because they have towed over that line. Even if what they did as an attempt will not impact their physical body in the same way today, they live and forever will in that 50% greater risk category. And it's why we really have to gain that information. We have to understand what they've gone through and what they're currently going through. Here's a picture of a PHQ-9. It's a Likert scale. Pretty, this one is actually filled out by the individual. I do believe a clinician has to review the PHQ-9, but the Columbia, a parent can ask those questions to their child. You do not have to be a clinician to be able to utilize that assessment. Safety planning also lives in lethal means reduction. If they have access to things, how do we put barriers in place? If it's a gun-owning home, we don't necessarily need to go to the extreme of take all the guns out of your house. A lot of people don't like hearing that. So how do we put barriers in place? Can we store the ammo separate from the firearm? Can we change the safe code? Can we get you a trigger lock? Really, like I said, they're very impulsive decisions. And if we can put, evidence tells us, if we can put time in between thought and action, it can possibly slow down that behavior. Safety plans should always be done with the client and, when possible, the supportive people in their world. Of course, what if they don't do it? People can refuse that. At the end of the day, we document that and we continue to follow up with them and have that conversation. We can be persistent in this type of world. We don't have to be annoying. So following up with people that we care about, hey, we had that hard conversation last week and it seemed like you shut down. Can we touch base on that again? Can we follow back up? Did you end up calling that therapist? Do you want me to sit and call with you? You don't have to be the clinician in the situation to safety plan with them. You can be the loved one. You can be the parent. A safety plan, you can find a number of different ones. What it does is puts in one spot, who do I call and what do I do when I don't feel right? Again, you don't have to be suicidal to do that. Lethal means reduction is huge in the suicide prevention world and really just in the crisis world. Open conversations are key. I don't have a script for this either, but much like the myth of if I think someone in my world is suicidal and I ask them, I'm giving them the idea. There's a myth that lives in the same group with lethal means. If I think someone might have a gun, and I ask them if they have a gun in terms of in meaning to harm themselves, am I giving them the idea to utilize it? So here's where I'll give you a statistic, and my small disclaimer on suicide prevention statistics is they are underreported. I could go into a lot longer spiel, but just take it at that, they're underreported. Minimally speaking, what statistics tell us is if you think someone in your world has access to lethal means and is thinking about suicide, at a minimum, they've thought about it 4 to 7 times. You are not giving them ideas. You are not giving them a plan. If you think they've thought of it, if you think they have access to it, they likely do. So having that open conversation of how do we put that barrier in place? If you're not willing to give it up, because again, we don't want to jump to that extreme unless we have to, how do we keep you living safe with these things in your home? We don't want to punish. You're not in trouble for going and buying a firearm and you're suicidal, but let's talk about that. Additionally, in the adolescent world, consider access to resources. Oftentimes we panic when we're worried about someone and we start to put in restrictions. Okay, we think you being on social media is triggering you, so we're going to take your phone at night. I'm not saying you can't. At the end of the day, you're the parent in the situation, but now you've reduced their opportunity to reach out to 988. If it's 3 a.m. and they don't want to wake you, but they need that resource. So can we look at turning off the Wi-Fi to certain apps? Can we look at parent controls? Can we look at empowering them to still utilize the resources that we're teaching them about without totally removing everything in their world? And how do we do that? Because again, I'm not trying to just strip your world of all of the triggers. I have to teach you how to live with them because this could possibly happen again. Here's a picture of a safety plan. The Stanley Brown tends to be one that it's evidence-based and people utilize a lot in the mental health world. It helps them identify what their warning signs are. So what I like to say to my clients is, when do you first notice you're not doing okay? Internal coping strategies. How do you first do things that can take your mind off of things? Lean into yourself first. If that doesn't work or you're not safe enough to do that, then what can we do to provide distraction? Who can we call? Where can we go that's safe? Can we walk around our neighborhood? Is that a safe opportunity? Can we call a friend? Who are people that I can ask for help? If I'm working with an adolescent, my one rule here is it cannot always just be your friends. I need at least one adult on there. Notice I didn't say parent. I need one adult. The other piece to a safety plan is if you're putting someone on your safety plan, my other rule is that person knows and agrees to being on your safety plan, especially if you're a teenager or a kiddo. Because if you're putting another friend on there, that friend has to understand if you're calling them at 3 a.m., what are ways that you can teach your village to help you? What skills can they use? Can they call your mom and you not get mad? What level does that look like? Because again, I want to help you live your life, but you also have to lean into those resources. And then of course it lists out professionals that you can lean into. And then the last one is making the environment safe. Truly, I wish that was higher up, but really looking at, like I've already kind of harped on, that lethal means reduction, putting some barriers in place, making sure that you are in a safe space. So what I will conclude with, you are human. This is a hard conversation, and because this is the reality of our worlds, we have to have these conversations, but it doesn't mean that we have to shy away from them. I know that I rambled and harped a lot today. My hope is that you're leaving a little more confident in understanding that this does not have to be a hard conversation. It is a simple one. It's also not easy. So recognizing that you're dealing with a human who in some capacity doesn't want to be here, hear them out, sit with them, and then let's get them connected to resources. I think this might be my last slide. Oh, I lied. I have one more. So what am I really trying to say? Let's wrap my rambling up. Assessments and safety plans help. Conversation and language does matter. Rapport is key. Confidence, even if you have to fake it initially. Remember, like I said, it is okay to say, this is hard and I'm nervous, but I'm going to ask you these questions because I have to, because I can't not ask you them. It's okay to fake that confidence initially. Even clinicians do it. Be vulnerable within reality. Again, I don't need you blubbering all over them because you love them. You're allowed to have that emotion. Take that to your safe space after the conversation and be real. At the end of the day, we are people. We are people helping people, no matter if it's professional or personal, and all we're trying to do is hold space. Thank you for your time.
Kirsty, thank you so much. That was so informative. I feel so much more confident with this whole subject. So, now is the time to ask any questions for Kirsty. If you have them, this is a safe space, so there are no dumb questions. So if you want to ask, now's the time. I also put in the chat a link where you can go and get your certificate of attendance. And we always record all of the sessions, and you can get that at mentalhealthkc.com. That is our Metro Council website. So, and yes, if Kirsty can get us the thermometer, I am sure Metro Council can put that on there. So yeah, thank you very much. Our next webinar will be on the fourth Thursday of next month. Be looking for it. And let's see, the link is not showing. Well, I thought I put it on there.
You might have to toggle it to host and panelists, maybe.
Ah, there we go. How's that?
Oh, and I guess I maybe sent
So,
my information in the wrong spot too. There's a couple people asking for my contact information. I'll put my email on here for you guys.
okay.
Feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help however I can. And there was one question in here about medical assisted suicide. And truthfully, Brooke, I don't know enough about that to comment one way or another. I would say I would lean into, if someone is thinking about suicide, the same approach all the way around. I truly don't have enough information one way or the other to truly comment on that. I'm sorry.
And the password is just below. It's Millar 9.25. It's added down onto that. So,
Oh, they're saying it doesn't work.
oh, oh, okay. Might have to ask Jamie if you are on, Jamie.
I'm seeing what I can find out.
Okay, okay. Kirsty, you did a wonderful job.
Thank
I
you.
can tell you are so passionate about the subject, and it definitely overflows whenever you're speaking.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't get the password to work either. I tried.
Hmm. Um, Jamie is working on it for us, so hopefully she can get us an answer here. Okay, Kirsty, we have a question. As a non-clinician, if I cannot get a client to a clinician, is it still possible to use the safety plan templates to create some sort of a plan anyway?
Absolutely. Those aren't forms that you have to use as a clinician. Of course, it's always recommended just for further assessment, but absolutely. And especially if they're willing to engage in that type of conversation, ideally we have, their village involved in the safety planning because they're who they lean on in crisis. So of course, totally. That's a great question.
Anything else? Kirsty, do
Unfortunately,
you have
Deanna,
folks? Oh,
no, I'm sorry, I saw it. Unfortunately, Deanna, we work in Jackson and technically Cass right now because of the grant funding that we have, but ReDiscover is Jackson and Eastern Jack. So once that funding runs out, it'll just be Jackson again. That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. I'm sure oh, they say the password is working now. So hopefully Jamie got it fixed.
Yep, it worked. I just was able
Okay,
to log in too.
perfect.
Yes, it should now be
Perfect.
working.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for your patience, guys. We appreciate it. And hope to see you guys next month at our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie, is there anything I need to do?
I don't think so. I think we are
We
good to
can stop the
go.
recording, correct?